Hey YouTube, what's going on? Lionheart here, and on today's video, I want to talk about my first impressions on Ganyu. You'll have to forgive me, my voice is kind of exhausted. We've been streaming and enjoying playing her for quite a few hours now on Twitch, and so my voice probably won't sound quite the same as usual. Anyway, I just want to talk a little bit about my first impressions with Ganyu and whether or not you should pull on her if you're a whale or if you're a low spend player or even a free to play and you're trying to figure out who your first 5-star is going to be. In general, I think you'll see that Ganyu is quite strong at Constellation 0. You should probably pull on her if you enjoy bow gameplay, but be careful about just blind pulling recommendations, because I will tell you that most of her playstyle and kit is locked behind charged attacks. This is pretty easy to control and play if you're on PC, but it may be more difficult on other platforms. So that's a consideration you really need to think about before just diving in and pulling for Ganyu. At C0, she's really strong. We were able to defeat Dvalin in one shot, and we were able to dominate Childe pretty handily as well. I spent most of today playing Ganyu at C0, and then at the very end for that Childe fight, I did take Ganyu up to Constellation 1, which I'll talk about in a moment. But in general, I feel like Ganyu's C0 is actually very good. You can run it two ways. You can run it with the Blizzard set and make it more of a standalone with Hydro for freezing, or you can go for elemental reactions by building Wanderers, which I think is going to be the more popular option, at least among content creators. Wanderers is really good because it allows you to take advantage of the 35% bonus damage on charge shot. You're going to see that most of her damage comes from her charge shot. And also it gives you elemental mastery, and you could hit some pretty wild numbers with melt. So yeah, I think that's going to be kind of the go-to build, but we'll make a guide on Ganyu later and we'll go into those. I have actually a full Wanderers and Cryo set built up for her. The reason why she's so good at C0 is because her charge shot just deals a crazy amount of damage. And it actually doesn't, there's not really any constellations other than C1 that improve that damage. So C1 will give you a cryo resistant shred at 15%, and it will also increase her energy regeneration, so you can have higher uptime on the ult. And if you're fighting inside of her elemental burst, which is her ultimate, right, you'll actually deal more cryo damage as long as you're standing in it, regardless of if enemies are standing in it or not. So you can kind of self-buff yourself and keep that up all the time. Keep in mind, her elemental skill and her elemental burst actually don't play very nicely with like melt. So if your goal is to get like big elemental reactions out of her, I think you're going to have actually a hard time doing that inside of her ultimate. It's not impossible. You actually can still do it. You can get the melt, you can trigger the ultimate, you can do the follow-up, you can reapply, but it's just not super easy. It's going to take a lot of practice. Okay, so and if you're just looking for damage, right, if you're just looking like to freeze enemies with a combination of Hydro or with other reactions, yeah, it's actually really nice. So yeah, other than C1 though, none of the constellations actually increase her charged attack and damage, right? So it's like you have the C2, right, which will give you an extra charge of her elemental skill, so you can do some crazy stuff actually later on if you end up going all the way to C6 for the high spending players. But then C3 and C5, right, they're just typical talent level improvements, and then C4 gives you increased damage. Enemies inside of her ultimate actually take increased damage, and it starts stacking up over time. So it begins at 5% and increases by 5% every 3 seconds up to a maximum of 25%. So that's good, but I think like C4 is unreachable for everybody except, you know, whales. And even at a whale level, I'm not sure that I would go all the way to C4. Like it's a good damage boost, don't get me wrong, but like if you're planning on like just focusing on melt and that's your primary goal, I don't know, I'm just not sure that I would spend all the way up to C4 unless you're really planning to like try and unlock the extra like talent level at C5 and you're trying to get to C6. And the thing that makes C6 pretty crazy, and I got to give credit to Vero for this, we were talking about it on his stream, is that when you get C6, you get the ability to instantly fire a fully charged shot after using your elemental skill. But because C2 gives you 2 charges of your elemental skill, you can actually pretty quickly machine gun off 3 fully charged attacks. You prepare a charged attack, you use that to draw aggro, you then use your elemental skill, do another charged attack instantly, elemental skill, do another charged attack instantly, and I'm willing to bet there's not really many enemies in the game that could survive that damage. Even if you weren't triggering elemental reactions, like that's just a ton of damage. I think when we went in and fought Dvalin with cryo set without any elemental reactions, he died in 3 charge shots, and I think the first shot was hitting somewhere around like 10 to 15k, but then the shatter out, the bloom was like 40k. So I mean, it's really a lot of damage. So let's assume the smaller range of those numbers there, you're talking about 150,000 instantly out, not including the damage from the elemental skill. Yeah, I don't think there's a lot of things that survive that. So so that's pretty cool, but that's unattainable, I think, for most players, right? Just most people are not going to wail out for C6, and I actually don't think you need to. That's the point of this video, right? I think she's very strong at C0, and I think that one of the nice things about her is you can put out crazy damage. You just need to like using charged attacks as a bow user. That's the critical part. Everything about her is really just gated behind that. The other thing to keep in mind is there's a lot of like question of like, what is Ganyu's role on a team? And I'll tell you, after having played with her at C0, and I can't say beyond C0, right? Because I've only tested up to that right now, and I'll test the higher constellations over the coming days. But at C0, I feel like you would give up too much of her kit running her as a support DPS. You could do it, but so much of her damage is in that charge attack. And if you're keeping her in long enough to fire off charged attacks, I feel like you're not getting the quick rotations that you would normally expect from your support DPS. So I'll give 2 examples, right? When you're playing Diluc with Chongyun, right? Chong comes in, quickly does his elemental burst, and is out, right? And Diluc's in most of the time. The same thing in the permafreeze comp, which I run, right? It's like Kaya comes in, Xingqiu comes in, and they support Childe, but Childe's the one that's in most of the time. They don't actually spend a lot of time in unless you're running a lower constellation Childe, in which case you do have some downtime, and you have to decide, are you going to use that? Who you're going to use for your downtime? Are you going to use bow stance, which is what I would prefer to do personally, and I think works really well, or do you want to switch off and maybe have a little bit more time with other characters? And then Albedo, who was on the last banner, right? Albedo comes in, drops his skills, gets out right away, right? And you have somebody else who's doing the main damage. So there's a repeating theme of like your main damage dealer being in, but not your support staying in for that long. And I feel like if you run Ganyu as support, she's going to actually have to be in for quite a while to do her charge shot, or you're going to give up like a huge portion of her damage in her kit, which is not good. So I don't recommend her in a support damage roll, although I do think at high constellation she can actually do it because of the power unlocked by some of the constellations, but I feel like she's very good as a primary damage dealer. And again, the threshold question for you should be, do you like playing bow characters in aimed stance? If yes, she's great. If you don't like that, I really don't think she's for you. I think she's a pass if you don't like that. So yeah, that's generally how I would think about Ganyu. I will follow up with a guide that goes into more detail around, you know, all the different build options, how to take advantage of her kit, the same way we normally do, and I'll show some weapon comparisons as well. So yeah, that's pretty much it for Ganyu. She's awesome. She's great at C0. If you're like asking, hey, I'm kind of like I'm like a smaller whale, like I spend some money but not like too much, should I go for C1, C2? Like, what are the low constellations that are valuable? I think Constellation 1 is very good. I don't think you need Constellation 2. I think Constellation 2 really starts to shine when paired with C6. I don't think you have to go for it. I think if you're thinking about Constellation, C1 is as far as you need to go as like a medium spender. And for most players, honestly, C0 is just totally going to be enough, and it's awesome. Just again, do you like charged aim stance play style for a bow user, right? That's the critical piece. So look, she's great. I wish you all the luck in the world if you decide to pull for her. And if you're interested in seeing some of the crazy damage output we were able to do at Constellation 0, here's some clips after this, layered with music that you can watch that I think are pretty cool, and hopefully you'll be impressed by what she's able to do. So if this video helps you, I hope you'll subscribe to the channel and enable alerts, and I really appreciate your support. And I can't wait to make a guide for Ganyu in the near future. All right. Have a great time playing Genshin Impact, and I'll see you on the next video.